Disclaimer. Firstly, apologies for the mic quality. I'm recording this after the rest of the video and my mic is acting up for some reason. The rest of the video does not have this popping problem though, so don't worry. Secondly, this video has been made primarily for entertainment purposes. This is not to disrespect Just Right, as I feel he is a very respectable mentor and peer within the writing community on YouTube, and he has taught me and many others innumerable valuable lessons in the art of writing. That being said, this does communicate my opinions effectively and somewhat thoroughly on this topic, and I will not try to hide them behind a false guise of, "It's just a joke, bruh." Now, with all that in mind, let's just jump into it!
Star Wars The Last Jedi is good.
No.
Well, let's try this anyway.
Yes or no, Frank?
It's gotta be no, dog.
The focus of the controversy around this film has to do with how it challenges the legacy of its own franchise.
While it is true that the primary focus of the controversy regarding The Last Jedi was around the poor handling and mistreatment of characters beloved by fans worldwide, I think it should also be noted that that isn't all there is to it. There are many other problems that fans and casual moviegoers alike had with The Last Jedi, from the overemphasization of modern day politics.
By the Mary Sue thing anyway. I find the term sexist in itself because it's Mary Sue. I don't think there's a thing called Ryan Craig.
To their mishandling of the new characters. To the now infamous Canto Bight filler arc. There's just so many problems that took people out of the Star Wars universe and kind of brought it back to our own. It didn't really feel like a galaxy far, far away for many of us. It actually felt like Earth.
But today I want to look at the dramatic bedrock on which all of these themes are built on rather than the themes themselves. You can still hate what the film chooses to say, but at least we can agree that it says what it wants to say in an effective manner.
But here's the thing, most people don't agree that it said what it tried to say effectively. In fact, many people's biggest gripe was how they hit us over the head with their point of view and how the world should be run. And they also did it in a very lazy fashion. For instance, one of the biggest jokes of January was how Rose Tico sought to free the animals and yet decided to leave the children slaves behind. I mean, you know, could have just had the children come with you, but I guess the animals were more important than literal children. So yeah, I think they kind of missed the mark with that one.
There's a critic I deeply admire who goes by the pseudonym Film Crit Hulk, who, in a practically novel-length essay on Man of Steel, proposed what he called the 7 basic questions of narrative drama. The 7 questions are a good way to diagnose whether or not you have a story, and they force you to be very clear with what the conflict is and why it matters. I think it's useful to talk about this in regards to The Last Jedi specifically because this film has 3 distinct plot lines, and each of them answer all 7 questions.
To be honest, I think the fact that all 3 plot lines can answer all 7 questions and yet still be underwhelming and piss poor says a lot about the practicality of using the 7 questions method as your only form of guidelines when discussing whether or not a story is actually god tier or piss poor trash. Because honestly, these plot lines and these stories were piss poor trash. They had the heroes run in circles, all of them.
So let's begin with part 1, wants versus needs. So questions 1 to 3 are, what does this character want? What does this character need? And how do those wants and needs conflict with each other within the character? So what's the difference between a want and a need? Wants are primal. They are animal instincts, things everyone relates to like power, money, status. A character will usually start a story relentlessly pursuing their desire, but this will lead them into trouble because their want is in some way immoral or misguided. It's not the thing they actually need to solve their problems. Needs are, according to Truby, what the hero must fulfill within himself in order to have a better life. When a character does what they need to do, we can see what the moral of the story is. is. Let's start with Poe, since his arc is the most overt. Poe wants to win the war no matter the cost. He's reckless and he doesn't consider the consequences of his actions. It's all dramatized very clearly in the opening action scene.
Now get your squad back here so we can get out of this place.
No, General, we can do this! We have a chance to take out a dreadnought!
What he needs is to become a more responsible leader and to learn when to retreat.
Okay, see, I'm actually kind of glad you started with Poe, because you're right. Poe's arc is the most overt. As in, the most overtly nonsensical, because it was ridiculous. Poe made all the right calls in that situation. Any military leader in Poe's position would have made those same calls. I mean, this guy saw what the Dreadnought was capable of. He knew what they were capable of. And so he took a risk, and the risk actually paid off. So I don't know why he was reprimanded, other than the fact that they're two white women and he's a man. And so the white women know best, you know, like Kathleen Kennedy. And the men need to fall in place, like Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams. I mean, I don't see any other reason for why he was given such a poor treatment for what he did. He was a hero, and he knew what he was doing. Yeah, he lost 15 men and women, but he took out over 100,000 others. Imagine that in real life. You have a squadron of 15. Plus you, that's 16. And you take out 100,000 enemy combatants. You will be a legend. That is legendary. I have never heard of a military feat so amazing and so awesome. Never. The closest we've gotten is this one in World War II where a group of about 20 or 30 guys made an army of 30,000 Germans surrender. That's the closest we've gotten. 30,000? That's a huge military feat. Those guys are legends. Imagine 100,000. And they don't even make them surrender. They just wipe them off the face of space. Not the planet, space. Yes, he did lose the bombers, but it was either them or the entire resistance as we know it. Because that dreadnought could have actually shot them. Whereas every other ship the Empire had very conveniently couldn't shoot them at a certain distance because plot convenience. The dreadnought could, and it would have. They would have all been dead. If Poe hadn't done what he'd done, there would have been no time for Leia and Holdo to complain about him doing what he did. And that's not even getting into the whole impracticality of the bombers, because they're based on World War II bombers, which are already outdated. Cause that's a whole other shebang.
There are things that you cannot solve by jumping in an X-Wing and blowing something up. I need you to learn that.
He has less internal conflict than the other protagonists, but all that's required here is a few moments where he second guesses his instincts before acting.
Use the Force, Luke. Let go.
The Force is strong in this one.
Luke, trust me.
It'll save the fleet, and it'll save Rey.
If I must be the sole voice of reason, Admiral Holdo will never agree to this plan.
Yeah, you're right, 3PO. It's a need-to-know plan, and she doesn't.
It's subtle and unspoken, but the sense that he is conflicted about doing something he knows Leia would disapprove of is palpable. Now, Rey is much more complex. She's got a lot of plot-oriented goals, things like getting Luke to help her or getting Kylo to switch sides.
Jeez, it's almost like she's a two-dimensional Mary.
But what she actually wants on a character level is external validation. She wants to hear that her parents are important and that therefore, so is she.
But why though? Why would she care that her parents are special or not? She never cared before. She waited at least a decade for them, and all that time she never knew that she was a Force user or that the Force was even even real. She thought she was just a normal nobody. So how come all of a sudden now she wants to know that her parents were special? And I mean, the whole point of her winning in the movie wasn't that they were special in the grand scheme of things. They were just special to her because they were her parents. The only people that were actually debating whether or not they were integral to the plot were the fans. So it's almost like Rian Johnson put the fans' opinions into Rey so that way he could systematically crush them and tell us to take a nearby broomstick and go,
Hey, we're not getting into that. Stay focused. But actually, since we're here, I think the reveal that our parents are nobodies is pretty brilliant. But anyway.
I don't find it brilliant at all to change a character and flip it upside down on its head just to make a presumptuous statement to the fans. Well, more like a declaration that you have the keys to the car and they're lucky that you're giving them a ride at all.
But anyway.
I mean, it came off as so amateurish that critics and fans alike called The Last Jedi Star Wars fan fiction. But subversion, like any writing trope, is by no means genius on its own. It needs to be implemented properly in order for it to achieve that title. And to change the narrative of the plot, characters, and story just to subvert audience expectations is not only the stupidest thing I have ever heard, but is probably the most lazy writing I have ever seen in any big budgeted movie, let alone a franchise as great and as bountiful as Star Wars, to the point of where it is so atrociously bad that the Star Wars franchise itself is collapsing.
But anyway, moving on. On screen, the characters are constantly saying that she can't stop herself from needing her parents, but for our purposes, this is her want, because wants are things you have trouble resisting.
That place was trying to show me something.
It offered something you needed. And you didn't even try to stop yourself.
Your parents threw you away like garbage.
They didn't.
They did. But you can't stop needing them.
What she needs is to become emotionally independent and to carve out her own identity. But Finn seems to be the character whose arc is least appreciated, and I think it's because we sort of expected him to start the movie as the person he only transforms into at the end of the movie. That sounds a little confusing, but consider this. Finn and Han feel like completely different characters personality-wise, but in each of their first films they have similar arcs. Neither of them care about the politics of the galaxy at all, and just want to look after themselves. Only later do they do something selfless. Han saves Luke, Finn tries to save Rey. At the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, Han is now not just a good friend, but a loyal soldier in the fight against the Empire. So I think we sort of expected that Finn would be one too. But Rian Johnson's insight into the character is in acknowledging that Finn hadn't yet made that step, and that he could tell a whole story about Finn's radicalization into the ideological battle of the Resistance. At the end of The Force Awakens, Finn acted to save a friend, so at the beginning of this movie, that is now his want, to save Rey.
Sorry, but this fleet is doomed, and if my friend comes back to it, she's doomed too. I've got to get this beacon far away from here. Then she'll find me and be safe.
His need is to become concerned not just with the safety of his friends, but of the galaxy as a whole. He needs to become a rebel. That's what Rose calls him out for not being at the beginning of the movie.
I saved you. Tell me. That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
I know you do, but she's an integral part of the story because of Part 2, conflict. The next two questions are, how do the characters' wants and needs conflict with the outside world? How do they conflict with other characters? The outside world one is pretty easy, right? They all conflict with the First Order, and Finn conflicts with the upper classes of Canto Bight. But as to the second question, each of the main characters is opposed by two others. One who represents or enables their wants, and one which forces them to realize what they need. The protagonist is sort of caught in a tug of war between these two opponents. Poe is in conflict with Leia because of his recklessness, but she doesn't force him to change his ways. She scolds him, but enables him as well.
Permission to jump in her next wing and blow something up?
Permission granted.
On the other hand, Holdo freezes him out of a leadership position entirely, and shows zero tolerance for his attitude.
Holdo should have told Poe the plan, let's be honest here.
I mean, she's pretty clear about why she doesn't trust Poe.
I've dealt with plenty of trigger-happy flyboys like you. You're impulsive, dangerous. And the last thing we need right now.
She doesn't trust how reckless he is.
Although I've actually talked to a number of real-life veterans and they've all come to a unanimous consensus that this was a very churlish and idiotic move on Holdo's part, I don't think I actually needed to ask them for their take on this situation, because it seems pretty logical that if you have a loose cannon in a team of yours that you are leading, you're going to have to keep closer tabs on them so they don't mess up everything for the rest of the team. I mean, I'm not a combat veteran, but I have led... Now this is gonna be nerdy. I have led group assignments for school, and when there are people that you don't know if they're gonna be able to handle their workload, then you don't let them go off and do whatever they please. You keep an eye on them and you kind of keep pushing them in certain directions, because if you don't, then they lack direction and then they hold the whole team back. I just don't see in any situation where because someone is a loose cannon, you're gonna push them away and tell them nothing about the plan. That is a guarantee that the loose cannon is gonna mess up the plan. Now, yes, there is the situation, maybe they don't agree with the plan, but better that than them not even knowing if there is a plan at all.
As for Finn, Rose keeps impressing on him that he has a moral responsibility to help those in need.
You're a selfish traitor. There's only one business in the galaxy that'll get you this rich.
War.
Selling weapons to the First Order.
While DJ argues that there is no objective morality and that Finn would be wise to be more selfish.
At least you're stealing from the bad guys and helping the good.
Good guys, bad guys, made up words.
It's all a machine, partner. Live free, don't join.
The detour through Canto Bight, which, hey, I know it admittedly has some pacing issues, is perfect on a thematic level. It's the splash of water in the face that wakes Finn up to what he needs to do. And finally, there is Rey, who, though she is briefly in conflict with Snoke, and I am not going down that rabbit hole, spends most of the film in opposition to Luke and Kylo Ren, one of whom warns her about the dangers of following her selfish desires and seeking for her parents, and the other who tries to use that to manipulate her into joining him.
You have no place in this story. You come from nothing. You're nothing. But not to me.
So, by the way, if you're wondering why Phasma or Chewbacca or Akbar or whoever wasn't in this movie more, this is why. These 10 characters encompass the entirety of the moral framework of the story. Everyone else is a prop, a plot device, or a meme.
So despite this glaring flaw where they obviously didn't know what to do with a bunch of major characters, you're still confident enough to say that
Star Wars: The Last Jedi is good.
I mean, okay.
Part 3, Change. Our final questions are essentially, how does this character change, and what impact does that change have on everyone else? Well, they all do what they need to do. Poe becomes a wiser leader, Rey becomes an emotionally stable Jedi, and Finn joins a team. In his fight against Phasma, Finn affirms that he has joined a side after seeing the damage a man like DJ, a man he was once like, can do.
You are always scum. Rebel scum.
Oh yeah, that's right. I almost forgot. Remember how the writers forgot that it's called the Resistance and not the Rebellion in the final part of the movie? They plagiarized so much that they actually forgot what it was called.
After the rebels are gone. After the rebels are gone. After the rebels are gone.
Poe grows through his conflict with Holdo, and his actions provide an opportunity for Finn to prove that he really is self-sacrificing. Kylo's descent into villainy pushes Rey into heroism, allowing her to save the remaining rebels. So each character isn't isolated. Each plotline affects the others, especially when the characters fail. In answering all 7 questions for each character, The Last Jedi tells complete stories. And not just for these 3 characters, but for Luke and Kylo as well. That's more dynamic characters, as in characters who undergo a change, than any other Star Wars film. But nothing I've said so far is an argument for this film being great, even though I personally think it is. Or at least one of its 3 plot lines is great. They are arguments for it being competent.
No! God!
For it having a rock-solid, dramatic foundation that I think you have to acknowledge even if the movie made you angry.
No! God, please, no!
The Last Jedi should be applauded for resisting the temptation to indulge its audience with fan service callbacks and references.
No!
For telling a real story that questions the themes and ideas of the previous films instead of just pandering to us.
No!
The Last Jedi may not be the film you wanted, but it is the movie this franchise and its audience needed.
No!